The 3:30 p.m. meeting of the Bakersfield City Council is now in session.
Whoops. Not yet. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to call to order the 3:30 regular City Council meeting of November 16th, 2022. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Weir.
Here.
Councilmember Arias.
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
I am here.
Councilmember Smith.
I am here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Gray. Here. And Councilmember Parlier.
Here.
Thank you. In keeping with Council's resolution, the public statements portion is now divided into two periods. There's a period for items listed on the meeting agenda and items not on the meeting agenda. Statements for items listed on this afternoon's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes per agenda item. Statements regarding items not listed on the agenda are also given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the council. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a public speaker card and give your completed card to the city clerk. We ask that you mark whether you're here to speak on an item listed on this afternoon's agenda or a matter not on the agenda. Speakers who do not identify a specific agenda item will be presumed speakers for the non-agenda portion. Those speakers will be called during the non-agenda portion of the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers regarding items listed on this afternoon's agenda?
Mayor Go, we've received 3 speaker cards for items listed on tonight's agenda. All 3 speakers are speaking regarding item 3A. The first public speaker is Michael Turnipseed, followed by Eddie Lane, followed by Richard O'Neill.
Welcome.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Michael Turnipseed. I represent the Kern County Taxpayers Association. I'm here to comment on today's agenda item 3A, the park study that's going on, and I've seen that there have been workshops concerning expansion of the soccer park out in the Southwest. And there are concerns. Going back to 18, there were a lot of promises made about how economically beneficial this soccer park was going to be. And I have asked the city for its economic analysis because at a public meeting of the Measure N Committee, the previous city manager promised that they would have an economic multiplier of 7, and we don't think that's very possible. But I have presented you with a copy of a study that was done a few years ago in Maryland about the complexities of expenditures and expecting to attract regional, state, and national competitions. I have provided a copy to the clerk and to the parks director, and I would hope that the city, before spending many more millions of dollars, would at least consider the economic ramifications of spending this money, because they were promises made in 2018 that so far have not been kept. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Eddie Lane, followed by Richard O'Neill.
Good afternoon, I'm Eddie Lane. Today I'm representing the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club has, for some years now, expressed our concern about the uneven distribution of funding, Measure N funding. And what I passed out, and the clerk already sent you one previously, thank you to the clerk, is from Priority 13 of the 2018 ballot measure, which reads, enhancing neighborhoods through additional code enforcement and improved park maintenance. Neighborhoods. And also what I passed out, it's right on the same sheet, it shows how much Measure N money went to the 2 sports complexes. And this is a little bit dated, but it's still relevant. Over almost $20 million went to those 2 complexes. Over $17 million for Mesa Marin, and Kaiser Permanente, for those two, over $17 million. 87% of the Measure N money allocated in those 2 years went to those two sports complexes. Now, Measure N is a sales tax. Regular folks and low-income folks, it hits their pocketbook more. It's what's called a regressive tax. And they're the ones, by and large, who supported this and got it passed. So in interest of fairness and equity, we need to have commitment of a similar amount of money in the urban core. And that's a continual concern of the Sierra Club. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Next speaker, please.
Richard O'Neill, followed by Edward Robinson.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard O'Neill. I'm president of the Kern River Parkway Foundation. And one of my responsibilities is tracking this Measure N spending money. And we think it's a good plan. I voted for the measure. And but one thing I wanted to note was we need to spend equitably, especially for the example tonight, the MLK Park. It's an inner core park that needs a lot of help, and as well as other inner core parks. And so I've been following MIG's work, going to the meetings, and I just hope that you're in favor of the enhancement of MLK. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Next speaker, please.
Edward Robinson.
Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Mayor, Council? I'm Edward Robinson. I'm a community social work practitioner. I reside in Ward 4. I'm also an Army veteran. My question, well, first, I believe that the consultants did a great job putting together this presentation. I reviewed it. The one suggestion that I have is I did not see a performance appraisal system in place. And I believe that in the interest of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's something that's important. I remember that the Parks and, I'm sorry, the name escapes me right now, the Director of Parks and Recreation, at the last meeting, he mentioned how there was a community member who, had requested a park. There were discussions about a park, and the kids had grown up, and the park was never there. And then they're like, okay, well, hopefully the grandkids can get it. So I believe that performance appraisal measures should be something that's considered and discussed among council as well as the committee, to kind of ensure that that diversity, equity, and inclusion factor is considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Madam Clerk, any other speakers in this category?
Mayor Go, that was our final speaker.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers regarding items not listed on the agenda?
Mayor Go, one public speaker card has been received from Michael Turnipseed regarding items not listed on tonight's agenda.
Welcome.
Good afternoon again. Michael Turnipseed representing the Kern County Taxpayers Association. I'm commenting now on the 5:15 session. It's not this meeting. So on item number L, the updates to the salary schedule, it has a lot of all the salaries increases are going to be. But I'd first of all like to ask on this resolution, what is the total cost to taxpayers of adopting these resolutions? And since there have been probably others previously that I didn't necessarily catch, I would like to have a list of all the resolutions were passed and all the expenditures of money and budgeted money to cover those resolutions since July 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. Madam Clerk, any others not on the agenda?
Mayor Go, no other speaker cards have been received.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Reports item 3A, Recreation and Parks Master Plan Update, Status Report and Presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Our Parks Department, along with our consulting partners, have been busy at work in recent months, taking a really hard look. We've had a Parks Master Plan for a number of years. We determined that it would be reasonable to provide an update to that plan instead of completely redoing the plan. And of a note for me, particularly, I feel like the level of engagement related to this plan was very strong. We had a lot of good events with very interactive types of charrettes and scenarios. And so I'll turn the time over to our Parks Director, Rick Anthony, to walk through a presentation for you.
Welcome, Mr. Anthony.
Thank you. For the record, Rick Anthony, Director of Recreation and Parks. I have with me Cindy Mendoza, who is our project manager from MIG. As Krishna alluded to, one of the highlights of this update, where I think it's about a year now that you all approved us to move forward with this, and I do thank you for that support. But one of the big highlights I think that you're going to get out of this is MIG has really done a tremendous job in engaging the community. There's several stakeholders groups, there's several committees, along with pop-up events that we've had. And so without further ado, I just want to go ahead and turn it over to Cindy Mendoza.
Thank you, Rick. And good afternoon, Mayor, Council members. It's my honor to be here today to be able to share with you the update with the Recreation and Parks Master Plan. Our goal for today is to receive specific direction on next steps, particularly for the renovation of MLK Park, but also to help make an informed decision there on how to move forward. I'm also going to provide some context with regards to citywide park needs as well, to kind of shape the conversation on next steps. Our planning process, as Rick mentioned, is a community-driven planning process. It does start with the update of the Recreation and Parks Master Plan that you see there in the box to the left, but it also takes a detailed look at many other specific elements and components of the recreation and park system for this city, specifically MLK Park, the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village, the tree canopy, both in the central city and citywide, the Kern River Parkway, as well as looking at McAllister Ranch and other opportunities. So with that in mind, we are going to focus our conversation today primarily on citywide needs as well as on MLK Park. And the reason we're providing this update midway through the planning process is because we are at a pivotal point of the planning process. We are just wrapping up the citywide assessment of community needs, but we are later in the process in terms of the MLK Park design, which allows us to create a preferred concept to move us forward into creating construction documents. So we'd like your guidance today on whether the preferred concept is aligned with your desires and goals for the city, and if we should go forward in taking next steps with regards to that park. One thing to mention in light of comments received already is we are not yet at the point of the process where we are creating the DEI performance assessment or creating the prioritization criteria that will identify which projects are most important to implement over the next 10 years. But equity and inclusion have been a pivotal underscore of all that we are doing, as well as in our outreach process. As Rick mentioned, we have conducted a very robust outreach process to make sure that we are not just hearing from advisory committee members and the people who typically participate in a planning process, but looking at guidance from residents, from other stakeholders, from other community leaders, nonprofits and organizations, tech specialists in terms of tree canopy and other issues, as well as making sure that we are reaching out to those populations that are traditionally underrepresented and underserved by recreation and parks. As part of that, we already know that there are some clear priorities that are emerging. For example, when we ask about the top recreation activities, survey results tell us that these includes nature exploration, as well as participation in your community events, for example. But many people also indicated that they would like to participate more in the activities you see on the right. Those lines that are in brown show the fact that in almost every area that we tested, people would like to participate more. We call that an unmet need, where it provides an opportunity to enhance parks and facilities to be able to improve the level of participation and engagement across the community. We also know that several community priorities are emerging already. When we tested the importance of various elements that this plan will address, what we first realized is that all of the elements score very highly in terms of importance, but two key needs are really emerging. One, in part because of a lot of the outreach being conducted in the spring and early summer, is the need for more shade and enhanced tree canopy. Cooling centers, for example, tested very highly. But the second one, and this is incredibly important because it actually came across a variety of results, is the need to renovate neglected parks, such as MLK Park, but also including others in the system. We found when we looked more at some of those needs around neglected parks that it includes everything from addressing safety to illegal dumping to maintenance, the quality of restrooms, repairing and replacing existing assets. And these are important before addressing the needs for more parks and trails. But we want to make sure that we are providing a robust analysis that includes a technical analysis of your park system. So we also looked at parks by their function, realizing, as several of you mentioned in stakeholder interviews that we conducted with you early in the planning process, that larger parks provided a variety of recreation opportunities, but they also meant that there is not as many close-to-home recreation opportunities. So fewer parks, but larger, creates a different type of use pattern across the system. We also know that a solid park and recreation system is going to include not only your neighborhood parks, but also parks that meet different needs. Your specialized parks such as sports complexes, natural areas such as the Kern River Parkway. So we are looking at all of those and even taking into account the undeveloped parkland that the city owns and has not been able to develop yet. With that, we started comparing some of these needs to your existing park standards to see how well you are meeting your adopted standards and whether those standards need to shift. As this slide shows, we look at the sufficiency of the park system in terms of park acreage. We call that level of service, and it's measured in acres per 1,000 residents. But we also look at it in terms of the distance that people need to travel to parks. And those include your close-to-home parks, but also larger parks that provide specialized opportunities such as swimming pools and your sports complexes that are typically provided within driving distance. Here noted is 3 to 5 miles. And what this allows us to see when we look at your level of service is that the city is deficient in parkland, not only for neighborhood parks, but also parks overall. And that is true even if we add in the parks provided by the North of the River Recreation and Park District, as well as county parks that are meeting needs within the city boundaries. We also know, in comparison to NRPA, the National Recreation and Parks Association metrics, that overall the city's level of service at 6.2 acres per thousand, and again that counts county and north of the river, is still closer to the lower quartile of what large cities across the country are providing. So that's another way we cross-check the acreage and needs. But we also look at needs in terms of park access. And this map with all of the circles is a quick way of measuring the service area provided around existing parks, comparing that to the areas that are currently developed for residential uses and those that will be developed for residential uses in the future, in order to identify what parks are needed now and where parks may be needed in the future. We call these parks circles here service gaps, or areas that are park poor at this point. And what we find is there are going to be 59 areas where, in order meeting your travel distance standards, the city will need parks now or in the future. And this 59 is obviously a daunting number of parks. One of the things we'd like to do is to start to help to categorize park needs in terms of areas where needs are highest. In other words, some people can jump in a car and drive to a park. In other communities, that's not as good of an option. So what you see are shades in red, yellow, and orange showing the health vulnerability and economic vulnerability of disadvantaged populations. Those circles in red have a higher need based on health vulnerability. And what's interesting to compare this map is to recognize that cities are not the only ones providing recreation and parks opportunities. We want to make sure we're taking into account other providers, schools that offer rec facilities, private recreation opportunities, etc. And so we pare this down in what we call an opportunities analysis to be able to focus on where needs are the greatest. And what we find is that 30% of those gap areas are places where there's no current recreation opportunity at all. So park acquisition and development would be needed. In another 19%, that's where the city already owns land, but had not had the funding yet to develop those sites for nearby neighbors. And in those two categories specifically, what we find is 6 of those sites that I just described are existing sites, meaning they lack a park now. The rest are in the future. So what does that mean in terms of deficient sites now? Shown in red are the areas where acquisition and park development are needed, both. And in blue are the areas where park development is needed of a city-owned site. So those 6 areas are critical in terms of addressing park needs. On the bright side, when we measure needs associated with access to larger parks, the city does a much better job in terms of serving the city within the 3 to 5 mile travel distance with sports complexes, regional parks, and other specialized opportunities. However, it is still important in terms of meeting facility needs to continue to develop the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village as well as Mesa Marin Sports Park. We also are measuring trail needs, looking in conjunction with other trails plans to see how we can improve park access, address non-motorized transportation needs, improve trail-related recreation use, and even improve connections to nature. So this map just quickly shows where existing trails are and where proposed or planned future trails may be located to assess need. We're taking into account facility life cycles, and especially when we look at major facilities, which are those ones that have a higher degree or need for staffing and operations, we recognize that the age of the facilities is a critical consideration in moving forward. And specifically for this project, we had a separate analysis done by an architect on the MLK Community Center and pool, as well as the Silver Creek Community Center. And what we found is that given the age of MLK facilities, it was recommended that instead of enhancing them, demolishing them is in order because they are not up to current code and current requirements for buildings. With regards to Silver Creek, that was actually simply phase 1 of the existing community center. And while it is in a good state of repair now, it is not ideally suited for expansion. So a recreation center should consider another site that is more accessible than building on that one. So 2 years ago, the city brought to you a list of deferred maintenance projects, and it started a very important process with council approval to invest in the repair and replacement of assets across the park and recreation system. We are building on that to be able to move forward and look at needs over the next 10 years. So we conducted another assessment to identify what needs to be maintained or sustained in its current state based on its life cycle, what would need repair or replacement over the next 10 years. And it told us that 3% of the outdoor amenities within the system need to be repaired or replaced. Another 14% repaired, and we have data on every site within the system to be able to prioritize sites based on those deferred maintenance needs and repair and replacement needs. But that takes us to MLK Park, which hits several of these marks that we've discussed in terms of being a neglected park, providing a safety issue with regards to current users, having buildings that are older and need to be demolished, being a community park that not only meets nearby needs in a close-to-home way, but also is attracting people from a larger distance across the system. So the current site and the mix of amenities you see there has created some safety situations, such as homeless encampments behind the ball field where visibility is poor. And so we wanted to look at this park in a way that would not only transition uses and improve sites for recreation opportunities, but also be aligned with other city goals, including being inclusive, diverse, reflecting the community's identity, being a catalyst for economic vitality and neighborhood revitalization, and moving forward to protect the green space and trees there, to address the shade issues that we were hearing so much about, and a number of other goals. We identified 3 potential alternatives for this site. We call them conceptual alternatives that allowed us to test with the public different options on how this might move forward. And these are intentionally different just to figure out what would rise to the top. We called the first one the Arts and Cultural Marketplace, the second one focused on sports and wellness, and a third one on multi-generational community and neighborhood activities. And the types of amenities and facilities varied within these different concepts. The same was true with regards to the building. Within each of these concepts, we brought forward different alternatives, including the first one that included the option to have a second floor with administrative and staff space for the Recreation and Parks Department and potentially for other community organizations. So these building concepts were also tested, not only with our MLK Park Advisory team, but we discussed it with key department staff, the Bakersfield senior management team, as well as went to the public in a community open house to get a sense of their priorities. And what came of this is not the selection of one alternative specifically, but this hybrid preferred concept that I'd like to discuss just a bit more. This concept is noted with the building that will be a new improved building that opens up not only to the front of the park along California Avenue, but also to the park itself, creating more visibility than the current building affords. It would have a gym that opens up to outdoor basketball courts as well. It would be developed in conjunction with either an outdoor pool or potentially a larger spray ground that wouldn't have as high of operations cost, but still would meet cooling needs. It would have additional sports fields, soccer fields being more of a priority in this part of the community, but also fields that create a higher visibility. And importantly, it would open to this outdoor plaza just outside the building that connects to that promenade through the center of the park, where events and programs and activities could be held, not only for immediate nearby neighbors, but also bringing in others from across the community. And if that second floor is added to the community center, that would also allow an opportunity for staff to have additional eyes on the park. So the combination of new activities, programs, and the more intense use there would help us transition some of the safety concerns that we see currently at the park. We looked in detail at the building program and what would be potentially prioritized there in terms of community needs and what are additional desired features and what that means for the size of the building. The current building is just shy of 25,000 square feet. We're proposing a building that is more aligned with either 50,000 square feet or with that second floor and the potential for additional age-specific space like a preschool room or senior space. Could be as large as 80,000 square feet. We're at the point where we would like to take this to an architect to further vet this and to look in more detail about specific building needs and to carry on that conversation with the city about the potential for the second floor. But at this point, we want to make sure that we are addressing all of the key components of the park, addressing the safety issues, making sure it provides the event and gathering space, the unique play opportunities, and the synergies with the surrounding community that are going to help economic development revitalize the entire area. What does this cost? At this point, we've only identified planning level costs. That means, again, not vetted specifically based on the mix of amenities and facilities, but more so based on the types of uses as well as the size of the building and a general square footage cost. And we use that to create these numbers here, again, just to be able to check in with you to see if this is in alignment, this level of investment is in alignment with your expectations. We know from our outreach it is in alignment with the community's preferences. Before we start dialing into actual construction documents and the architectural vision and renderings of the building, we wanted to pause here to ask your guidance in a few specific areas, and specifically feedback with regards to whether this site should go ahead and include a pool or whether it might not include the pool as a cost savings measure, whether the preferred features associated with the larger building are desired and we should continue to explore that, or whether we should look to pare this back. I think this now represents a substantial investment in an area that is long overdue for this type of investment. And so again, we're asking your guidance and insights on how we should proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. It's been great to see MIG all through the community at so many events, so we appreciate it. Mr. Anthony?
No, I was just going to say that kind of concludes our presentation, but we certainly want to open it up for further discussions or questions from the dais.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me begin by just expressing my appreciation to Mr. Anthony and his whole team in the Recreation and Parks Department for all of the hard work that has been put into this particular update, and certainly MIG and all the effort that you've made over the last few months. It has been great to see so many outreach events and participation in many community events to receive real input from many of our community members throughout the community. And, you know, it's just been remarkable to see, and I really appreciate all the effort and the intentionality. Also want to recognize my colleague over here, Councilmember Arias, for championing the concept of revitalizing and updating MLK Park. It is timely. We've heard from the public tonight, and we've heard from many community members throughout the last several years the need to invest in our parks and our recreation programs in an equitable manner and to really address some of the needs in our disadvantaged neighborhoods. And MLK Park is a priority and should be a priority for all of us in the city. So to answer the questions from my perspective as just one council member, to include a pool, I think we should. I think the community deserves and enjoys that facility, and we ought to maintain it. Regarding the building and the community center, I believe this is our opportunity to really invest in a signature project that is remarkable for our city, that is something that we can really change the game and becomes a catalyst for future economic and neighborhood revitalization efforts throughout the surrounding neighborhood. And that we ought to make a significant investment that's bold and that's impactful for decades to come. We ought to have the same vision that our predecessors had in the 30s when they invested in the community center that long ago. And we need to find the resources and find the will to make this happen. And so my desire is that we do all of the above and we focus on the all desired features, 80,000 square foot facility that will be a flagship and something that will serve all of the community and something that all citizens of Bakersfield can be proud of and will hopefully, I'm sure, will visit and enjoy for years and decades to come. So with that, I'm interested in hearing comments from my colleagues, but that would be my feedback, and if you need a motion, consider that the motion to not only receive the report, but also to move forward in this concept.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for all your work. I agree with Councilman Gonzalez. I think it's an opportunity. We've talked about signature projects for a long time with Mr. Turnipseed, and I think this is our opportunity to really do a signature project in a disadvantaged area that gives us return on investment in a lot of different ways. And I would agree that, the 80,000 square feet, I did see that the outdoor basketball courts might need a little shade, but I'm sure there's plenty more work to do. But that's my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Parlier.
Thank you, Mayor. Rick, I want to echo what Andre said regarding your staff and outreach efforts. We talked several times about your outreach efforts. In fact, help facilitate a facility in Ward 7 for that outreach effort. I love the plan going forward. I think it's overdue with MLK Park to provide those efforts for that community. But I want to touch on a couple of things in Ward 7 particularly. Can you go to the park access slide for me, please?
With the circles that we showed?
Yeah. There we go. So circle 23, and I might pivot to 27 over there too. I don't know if you remember or not, it's going back a few council meetings. There was residents that showed up here. There's a neighborhood that is more or less built out, and the park sits vacant. They've paid the park development fees, and still nothing's happened. It shows that it is 23 is low health vulnerability, but yet 27 is high health vulnerability, but you could throw a rock from one to the other. So I don't quite get that, why one's low and one's high. But nevertheless, I think that park is overdue for that area. And again, those fees were paid. And at the time, I'm talking to staff like, prices have gone up, but at the time those neighborhoods have gone in, what they paid in fees probably would have paid for the park, but the further we go out, the more that those monies that they put in don't necessarily cover those costs with inflation and everything. But if that can be, put on your schedule at some point soon. In fact, 4 years ago, I was promised that it was going to be in 2 years, and now it's 4 years later, and we're still talking about it. So again, I'd sure appreciate that. So the Kaiser Permanente Park and what Michael was alluding to, force multipliers and stuff. So that area, the city is really growing to the south. And in 2018, when staff was talking about projections, even now, 4 years later, there's neighborhoods that have sprung up out there that were just vacant fields. Infrastructure's coming on. There's close to $1 billion of proposed investment that's going to be coming to that area. Industry, potentially 4,000 jobs associated with it. So that, I think, is a force multiplier. And those people are going to need homes and are going to need recreation. But I do agree that if we need to toggle a little bit on some of that expansion so we can do some of those infill projects like Circle 23, I would appreciate it. Christian, there's some land out there that is owned by the city too, and I think we're planning on some sort of development, albeit not associated necessarily with the regional park, but some other sort of commercial development and stuff. So I'm going to make a referral to planning and development that we look at those properties and just kind of have a long-range discussion about what we're going to do with them. Things are changing out there every year, and as far as what we want and maybe what a developer can bring to us for those properties. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Parlier. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, and nice presentation. It's well organized and gave us a good look at the big picture. But you were asking, I think, for some feedback on the MLK Park and the direction, and I wanted to back up for a minute and remember why we started the process, which was, I think, before you got here, and it was to revitalize the area, not just to build another sports park. The park is only an amenity for the the revitalized area, which we hope for a lot of redevelopment. That's going to include all the things, not the school, but the land on two sides of the project, if not across MLK Boulevard, that before we finish the process, we have to have some idea what we will do with the land adjacent to it. Because if we don't have new commercial, new apartments, new everything surrounding this park, there's no point putting 50 or 80 million into it. It's going to be similar to what it is now. You have to change the areas, so we have to broaden our scope as to what we're trying to do down there. And so that which will cost more, I understand. We need to add to this some vision of redevelopment around the park, or the park won't succeed if the area stays the same. That's my fear. I don't think we should start worrying about costs yet and asking, do we proceed this? Because I don't think we have a good enough grasp on the whole thing. We haven't had any, my understanding was we haven't even brought the park designers in. I don't think this is much, if this block out isn't really a design that's very exciting to me. We need some professionals who create an exciting park. And it may not cost us, we don't know if we need an 80,000 or 60,000 square foot building at this point. We don't know if we need 2 soccer fields. Maybe we need 1 because we haven't really, we didn't really settle on, you gave us 3 alternatives, and I'm sure we all have some blend of those 3, but the cultural and community center theme appealed to me a little more than just another sports park with the basketball courts on the end. You drive by, it doesn't look good. The way this is designed, it would look terrible driving by. A building pressed up against MLK Boulevard, you look at the back of a building. That's not really very exciting. So I'm hoping we can look at this as you want to call it a regional or district revitalization project with a park as the major amenity to stimulate the area. And I don't necessarily think, 4 tennis courts stimulate the area. I mean, a place where everybody wants to go and the community goes, on Saturdays, and you have, swap meets and open air marketplaces and senior centers and all of these things. And whether we have a weight room, we have a lot of other facilities that provide some of those other things for us. So we don't need to duplicate in here just to say, well, we got to have 2 soccer fields and a dozen tennis courts. We've got other places for that. Let's remember, this was to be the gym of a community. So I'd like us to change our thinking a little bit, or at least be open as we hire the park designer and get someone, and maybe the same people who you hire can do this. Show us if you had the money and we could acquire these properties around it. What would we do with them? Because I think they're going to be vital to making this park a success, or we're just going to have a crime-ridden park down there, that's kind of a sports park. But, hey, I love the sports, and I've championed this vision from day one, but I want this to be more of a community center than just a sports park. Because we got soccer fields, we got these stuff in other places. Let's make this one really unique where the community goes to. And I see him interacting between the commercial on the side and everything, going back and forth. And our typical parks, the way they're designed now, wouldn't really work as that kind of an amenity if it's just like all the other parks, just bigger. So I'd like you to continue and get the designers in and get some vision at the outside, and let's set aside telling you, yes, you can spend this much money or not, because we don't know what the cost of these things are. And I don't want to get hung up on that. That'll crimp all the creativity. If we get boxed into that, you may have too much per square foot budgeted for your building. Let's not get hung up on that yet. Let's keep a little bit open and maybe get it. The designers you're going to hire in, bring us a new vision whenever that is, 6 months, show us, well, here's what we're looking at. And yeah, the development part is extra money, but maybe they'll have some ideas that, I think 80 million's probably a little bit hard to swallow for one park, quite honestly. So, I'm hoping we can do the park for, if the whole thing was 100 million, including all the stuff around it, I'd say great, but I think that's a bit rich, and I think we can get all of those elements, or most of them, without spending 80 million. but I don't want to get into arguing about cost yet. I think that's premature. So, I mean, I like the direction you're heading. Let's kind of go to the next phase and broaden this and come back later with some discussion about, do we have, I don't know, we're paring it back before we've hardly started the creativity. And that
if I can address, that's exactly kind of why we're here today. First, thank you, Councilman Freeman, for bringing that up. But you're correct. It really is that conceptual phase, and what you saw is really just the beginning. But if we're going to go down a path which will include expending quite considerably significant amount of money to begin that design, we need to make sure that everyone is on board with the concept. And I also want to just kind of reiterate that what we brought to you is actually a hybrid of the Arts and Cultural Center and sports fields. And it was heavily vetted by not only the committee, but also the general community. So what we're presenting to you is what the community would like to see. Some of them are new ideas that the park doesn't currently have, but a lot of it are identifying what the community wants. So that's kind of what we're here. I agree that we can bring back something a lot nicer. It will change, but there's no sense of going down this direction if we don't have buy-in early on. So you will get another update. You will get more detailed plans and concept as we move forward. We just need to kind of have the thumbs up that this is the direction, or else we're kind of wasting funds if we're going to have to go in a completely different direction.
What do we have to say exactly how big the building is right now? I mean, we have, when we do committees and the kind of thing, I've done these, everybody gets a list, so we have a 20 minutes, everybody's happy, we have all 20 things, but they don't necessarily mush together and make a real project. Some will have to be eliminated, new ideas may come in, and so yeah, I mean, I think you should proceed, but it may be that in the end you say, you know, we're not going to have tennis courts, or we're only going to have 3. We're going to have 1 soccer field, or the building can only be 60,000. But, you know, so you have the elements that you're trying to weave into a new design.
Sure.
But to say, no, it's all fixed now. Community said this, we got to do this 87 million park. Well, that may not work.
Yeah.
So I'd rather, and I don't want to, if you hire someone, say, these are the elements the community would like to see. Now, see how you can best weave them in, or there's some things you think don't fit, or what have you seen in other areas? We're trying to bring people from outside who've done this and seen ideas from other areas that this really worked over here and they didn't have a soccer field, or this really worked over here and they didn't include a pool. I don't know. So I like the direction you're in. I would want you to proceed. I just, I don't want to get so fixed on everything yet that we start
and I hope that's not where we are. We aren't fixed on it. We're just trying to give you a general idea. There are going to be a lot of additional work. The architects coming on board. There's going to be site restrictions. All those things are going to happen, which we will be evolving and also bringing updates not only to the city manager, but to the council as well. And I think
if I could just reframe what I think the question is and what I'm hearing is, because this is the first time City Council has seen, you know, this much information, that this could be a significant investment, and I would say tens of millions of dollars. We don't have to put the exact dollar amount on it, and I would reflect too that I anticipate, you know, at a large project, we're going to need to go look for grants. We're going to need to go look for direct allocations from the state or the federal government. I mean, we need to go and acquire funding for this project. But what I think the question is there appetite for us to continue to develop these more detailed or even more visualized plans for a significant investment park? And I think I'm hearing the answer so far has been yes. I think Councilmember Freeman has said yes, but let's not have it locked in. It's not that exact number, but yes, for a significant investment signature project, let's go and take it to the next step. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, remember, you could have to build it in phases too. I mean, we may not have 80 million to pop out one year.
Right.
This may be multiple phases. We've raised the money for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Sure. I mean, the building takes up most of the cost in your estimate. So I just think we need to stay open and have some alternative designs and look at what other people have done. Maybe there's a great community center that's 50,000 square feet, meets all your needs, that they have someplace we can go look at. You know, that's, I just want to stay open and not worry about the cost quite yet. We know it's going to be significant, okay?
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to respond to my colleague's sentiments, I think what I hear is, you know, we shouldn't necessarily be paying so much attention to the what, but how we're doing it. Let's make sure that what it is that we do and what we transform it into, we have enough money to do it effectively, do it well, for many years and hopefully decades to last. And I can certainly appreciate that and want to make sure that we follow through on that. But before I get to some of my other comments and questions, I want to thank MIG. You have done a tremendous job. There have been countless community events. We've seen you out there, have gotten super positive feedback from community members, stakeholders who just see you. They know that you're listening. They know that you're you know, taking their feedback into consideration. And they, along with myself, feel very confident that what's been produced tonight is reflective of what the community needs. And for that, I want to say thank you. Also want to thank Rick. Rick, I don't know that this project would be happening without your leadership and your vision for our community, nor would we be in a place talking about, you know, the park assessment in general for the entire city, but specifically to MLK. So I also want to thank you, want to thank your staff for making this happen, and thank the rest of my colleagues who have been supportive and see the real need in the community right there at MLK. So thank you for going on this endeavor. I want to acknowledge also the history. This has not taken place overnight. You know, there have been many community meetings even before we've, you know, brought on MIG, talking about, you know, what we want to see in MLK Park. We had an unfortunate tour of the African American Veterans Center a couple months ago. We have now acquired that from the county. That took much longer than anybody could have ever imagined. But we got it done, in large part thanks to staff. And we are now in a position to go big. And for many, many, you know, months, years, certainly since before I've been on council, we've been talking about what are we going to do, what kinds of game changer projects are we going to take up as a city. And here we are, and I think we are looking one right in the eye. And so I'm very excited. I think we need to go big. We need to make sure that you know, going back to Councilmember Freeman's comments, we need to make sure that this transforms not only the park, but the broader community. There are some economic development opportunities that I see there. And I think one of the pieces that I think we're missing in this particular presentation is talking about the connectivity. You know, and I know we've had conversations about what does that look like with the school behind it. The other one is we're redoing California Avenue. Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez, for helping us push that across. But how do we talk about connecting that with parts of Old Town Kern on the northern side of California Avenue? How do we connect it to those on the southern part? You know, how do we address some of the street racing that takes place on the west and east side of the park? And I think those are the broader contextual issues that we need to be looking at as we look at a design for the park as well. When it comes to the particular questions that you laid out, the pool, I think it has to be there. I think it's certainly an amenity. Yes, we have pools on different parts of town, but making sure that there's one right there in the community. It is a very dense community, highly populated, and to have that access, right, have that access just down the street is going to be so important. And I think it's also a part of tradition and history. It's been there since the 1930s. Many families, many, you know, of my former constituents remind me that, you know, they and their families and their siblings and their cousins would all go to the community pool after school, and I think it's something that's very important that we maintain. I think we go big. I think we implement all desired features. I think one of the things that is so important, especially when we're talking about the safety front of this, is that we see a lot of that negative activity kind of go away the more positive foot traffic we have in that park. So I love the idea of having staff there. I love the idea of having park rangers present on a consistent basis to have opportunities for the students, of which there are, but certainly opportunities to grow and bolster So let's go big. I think this is going to be great. I did have 2 questions, though. I want to make sure that we fulfill our commitment to the African American community with the unfortunate circumstance of the Veterans Center. I saw that there was a memorial plaza. I wanted to ask what that's all about.
You want to take that, or you?
The Memorial Plaza is intended to be something that is at the opening of the building, so that everyone who approaches the community center will have an opportunity to pause and reflect on some of the contributions that has made our society, our nation great. And it allows us to honor not only the veterans, but also the others who have helped shape the neighborhood that is and helped found MLK Park. So the thought is that it is some sort of an interactive opportunity. It is a place of reflection, but also a place of gathering and celebration at the same time, that people will again pause and be reminded of what's important as they enter the building to recreate.
Excellent. That sounds great. With that, job well done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Arias. I don't see any other requests to speak. This is supposed to be a receive and file. Councilmember Gonzalez, did you actually have a motion?
Let me ask City Manager Clegg first if you were looking for formal direction or...
Thank you, Councilmember. I think the motion that you stated previously is sufficient. That is, receive and file and, direction to continue in the planning process.
Perfect. And that's my motion.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is unanimously approved.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Closed session item 4A, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code section 54957.6.
Motion to adjourn to closed session.
We're adjourned to closed session. Reconvening the 3:30 council meeting. Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. We had one item on closed session tonight. Item 4A is an apple, and there is no reportable action. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we stand adjourned at 5:23. And we'll start the next meeting in just a minute as soon as Technology Services has a chance to do what they need to do. Thank you.